Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. Keith, welcome back into the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Let's talk some football because, yeah, it's nice out. It's like we want to go outside and do some stuff, and yeah, it just feels like it's spring and active and football comes to mind, even though football's a fall sport, but it's just like, let's go out and do something.
Yeah. Spring training ended and it immediately turned to summer here in Arizona. So it was kind of chilly all spring training. It was nice, but it was a little chilly and a little windy, 5-7 degrees under normal temperatures here. And as soon as spring training ended, I kid you not, it went into the 90s and it's been there since. And it's, for me now, so like yesterday it was 97 degrees. So 97 degrees here means you just take off your sweatshirt coming out of spring. That's really what it means for me.
No.
Yeah. It's you get used to it. I'm telling you, if it's below like 80, like you bring a sweatshirt just in case, because you never know. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's beautiful out here, though. Today's show, we're going to talk. We're getting back into our NFL prospects series, and we're at the defensive line guys. So defensive tackles and edge players and traditional defensive end guys. And Seattle is actually in pretty good shape right now on the roster with those position groups. I think we talked a little bit right before the show where I said, where are we deficient? Where are we really good? You said maybe at defensive tackle, and that's might just be a role player. And they have Cedric Lattimore on the back end of the roster too, that I think that they really like too. So I'm not even sure if they didn't even make a move there and just got some undrafted guys to come into camp, they might be okay. But we'll talk about that. And before we get into that part of the show, let's talk about just the last week or so since we've been on of Seahawks free agency. We had a number of different contract amounts come out that we didn't have before that really make the offseason look really good for Seattle. And it just kind of came together, when you started free agency, and this absolutely, it could have gone south. I mean, we didn't really have a lot of cap space. We had a lot of unrestricted free agents to either re-sign or move on from and then replace. And so it was looking pretty sketchy. The whole thing
very
started
little
out
draft capital
and
to replace
4
guys,
draft
yeah.
picks initially. We ended up starting the entire process by unloading Carlos Dunlap and his $14 million cap hit, just so that we could have some room, knowing that they would like to bring him back, but nothing's guaranteed. He could have gone on and signed with another team. The market there kind of was soft for him, so he was able to come back. Ended up being just a tremendous team cap friendly deal, along with all the other moves that they made. Keith, what's kind of stood out to you as far as one or two moves, including what we ended up doing contract wise, that really stood out for you?
Well, I really like the trade for Gabe Jackson at guard.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. I'm an offensive line guy. But they took what was the weakest spot on the offensive line and made it a huge strength. And then they turned around and signed him to a new deal. It's a 3-year deal, tore up the remaining 2 years of his contract. So it actually was only a 1-year extension in terms of team control and all that, because he was already under contract for this coming season, 2021 and 2022. And now he's playing on a completely new contract for all 3 of those, for those 2 years and one more.
Why did they do that?
Because allowed them to. When you trade for a player, you don't have any of that dead money because of the signing bonus. I mean, the team that traded him, so in this case the Raiders, had to eat all of that.
And so he came in with completely unguaranteed money so that you could massage that to your advantage.
He had no dead money left in his contract for Seattle. So they were able to rework that in any way that they could agree upon to do. And so finding a way to get his cap number really low for this year, give him an extra year, give him some more guarantees, make him happy that way, but get his cap number way down for 2021. It just made a lot of sense. So they traded for him, gave up a 5th round pick, which is, pocket change for most NFL teams. And then re-signed him. So now he's under contract for 3 years and has a really low cap number this year, which created a ton of cap space, which they need right now.
Is that did that contract include any voidable years, which the Seahawks seem to stack up several times as well in the contracts that they gave out this? I
don't know. I don't know if there was a 4th voidable year on there or not. But I just looked at he's on the roster for 3 years. He's under team control for 3 years. If there's a 4th voidable year out there,
I'm going to go look at it.
I missed that part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the deal to me that stands out. I mean,
I'll break it down for you here. 3 years, $22.575 million, $9 million signing bonus. Average salary APY is 7.5. Total guarantees 10 million essentially. You got that at signing. So that's how they're able to spread that out. Mm-hmm. And there's no void year. So
no void year on that one.
It's a legit 3-year contract.
Yeah, so it's about $7.5 million for an elite. Top
by the time he gets
guard.
to 2023, the dead cap hit would be $3 million if you moved on from him. Mm-hmm. So, pretty reasonable overall. And the cap hit in 2021 is only $4,075,000,
which is down from 9.
Absolutely.
And not only that, but so it's down from 9, but his average over the 3 years of the contract is just over 7.
Yes.
So he actually
he got guaranteed money is basically what he traded.
Yeah, he gave up a couple million in per year to get guaranteed, and basically guarantee him that he's going to be on this roster for at least 2 full years and get all of that money, as opposed to coming in, playing for 1 year at $9 million, and then maybe getting cut when the team needs cap space or whatnot.
I totally agree with that as being one of the standout moves of the offseason so far. The other interesting thing I thought is kind of the opposite end of that is that internally they decided not to do anything with the contracts of Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner to generate the cap space necessary to make the moves that they did. They went elsewhere to do it, did some creative things, added voidable years onto contracts to spread out bonus money and so forth to lower 2021 cap hits. We talked about them doing that before the offseason started. Are you surprised in the way that they've approached the offseason and written up these contracts? Because they've been a team that's been very good with contracts so far up until just right now.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I'm surprised because it's out of character. I'm not surprised in that this is a very unique year. The cap went down by about $15 million. And the cap never goes down. It always goes up, right? But because of COVID and lack of, player or fans in stadiums and whatnot, revenue is down. And so it's just a unique year. It's a unique situation. They also signed the new TV deal that is like twice as big as the old one. So the cap's going to go up very quickly after this year. So to take some of the pain out of this year where it goes down and stretch it into the years where it's going to go up really quickly makes a lot of sense, makes a ton of sense. And So the team was able to do what they needed to do with those contracts and reload this roster and get ready for another run in a year where when it's coming down and there were all these constraints and all of that. I think it was really well done.
So the just running a couple of 2021 cap hits by you.
Mm-hmm.
Benson Mayoa 2.2, Chris Carson $2.5 million cap hit in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
He came back on a deal. So not to brag or whatever, but we talked about Chris Carson and what would likely happen in his market. And we said, he's going to go out there. He wants, 8 or 9, which is kind of a top 5 kind of guy.
And he's not going to get it.
And he's not going to get it because he's missed time. He's had some fumble issues. He's going to be a little older. And if he was able to come back, he would likely come back on about a $5.5 million deal, maybe a 1-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
That ended up being kind of what he did. And then the lower cap hit on 2021 is just the cherry on top. Legit be around for a couple more years. I think that's a good move for Seattle. Now, if they can get 12 to 14 games out of him every year, which is kind of what you're going to get now with him. It'd be awesome if he would play 16 games plus playoffs and have 20 carries a game, but I don't know that his body is going to be able to take that. We'll see, but nonetheless, that's a really good contract for the style of running back that Seattle likes to have there.
Yeah, and a good player, knows the system. I mean, the guy is a difference maker when he's on the field. I think that guys that are like him that miss a lot of time, now we have a 17-game season, and they need to make sure that they've got people behind him.
Well, let's talk about the running back situation. Penny's coming back off the ACL. Could have maybe, come back more last year, maybe, but he'll be back this year, hopefully at full strength. That's a really nice tandem, I think, especially with Waldron on that stretch zone. I think Penny's actually a really decent player for that scheme.
Oh, yeah.
And then Collins on the back end, we brought back on a veteran minimum deal, and then the young guys, Homer and Dallas. Is that a good group? Are you satisfied with that? Do you think that they address that at all in the draft? If a player were to come to them, fall to them, be there for the taking?
With 3 draft picks, I don't think so. I mean, they have Penny, they re-signed Carson, and you've only got 3 picks. I don't think they address it in the draft. They might address it after the draft or that kind of thing. But they'll look at adding to that room. I mean, Carson was a 7th round pick, so
they could buy a 7th round pick if they wanted to. So
they'll if there's a guy they like and they think could be the next Carson. That's that late.
It'd be kind of cool if Chris Evans was sitting out there in the 7th round and we wanted to buy an extra pick just to get him. That would be kind of an interesting player to have for next year when Penny is in a contract, or he's in a contract this year. They're not going to put a 5th round or a 1st round 5th year option on Penny this year. There's just no way.
He would have to come out this year.
Well, no, they have to put that designation on him by like May 3rd or 7th or something like that. So I guess he's a year further into this contract than I was thinking. But I was like, he would need to come out and just ball out. But even then, if they have to do it now, right,
they're going to say no. And then if he does, he has a monster year, well, then they'll pay him next offseason.
Maybe. Kerry Hyder, which is another incredible deal, really. I mean, $2.25 million cap hit in 2021 for a player of his caliber. He's a great edge setter, base side defensive end that immediately is an upgrade over Rasheem Green. They plan on moving Collier inside a little bit more this year, but even an upgrade over Collier for sure. And a player that's just very disruptive all the time, even when he's not getting to the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, great player. And I cannot believe how little he signed for. Like, he is a guy that I was expecting to, even in this market where there's very little money to go around, everyone was taking less than you would normally see. I expected him to get,
he got Benson Mayo level money.
Yeah.
Where he's more,
and he's a better player.
He's a better player than that. Yeah. He's
So,
more of a on the field 70% of the time player, whereas Mcneil is a 40% maybe guy.
yeah.
But he got a 2-year, $6.8 million deal with a $2.5 million signing bonus. Total guarantees 3.6. It's amazing. Now they did do a third year void with him. That helps spread that out. But even the dead cap in that third year is only $850,000, considering the cap space in 2023 is projected to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 million or more.
$250 million.
Okay. Well, no, I mean available cap space.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Available cap space. Now that's the minimum based on before TV contracts were announced. Like we don't know exactly how much that cap's going to jump, but I can guarantee you it's going to probably be more than we think. And then from there, you've got Cedric Abuahe that they brought back. Keith, we didn't even talk about that before, but I think last week's show, we talked about some of the holes that are still out there. And one of those was swing tackle, guy that can play both on the right and the left. And he's a guy that came in and played okay. He had a kind of a tough outing once, but the other 2 or 3 times that he was in there, I thought he did average. And that's all you can really ask out of a guy that's going to be a backup.
He's a backup. He's a guy that you want for roster flexibility because he can play both sides. He can come in, if someone gets hurt, he can start at either, although you don't really want him to because he's a backup. But those guys have value. And I think that people forget that you've got to have reserves, and they've got to be able to, they're not going to be as good as your starter. If they would be elsewhere starting. And so it is going to be a little bit of a step down from your starter, but you want someone that can be competent and can be competent at multiple positions. And he showed he could do that last year. And so it is a good move because you need those guys. You can't just always have, your starters in there. It just doesn't work that way.
So the best move, I thought that fully encapsulated the ability and the knowledge of John Schneider is the Carlos Dunlap move, because he had to do this move in a multi-layer situation. First, he had to release the player. Before he released the player, I'm sure that they had major conversations about this isn't because we don't like you or we don't want you. We just can't have you at the $14 million cap. We've got a lot of things going on with the team roster-wise. We need that money. What we'd like to do is have you go test the market. If you get that, we'll try to match that if we're in a position to do it. Or if the market's soft, come back. We're still interested. Let's put together a contract we can both be happy with. So they did that. It allowed Seattle to be able to have some flexibility early on. And then when the market did prove to be not there for Dunlap, he came back willingly to a team that he really expressed that he liked. He liked the culture. He wanted to be here. And he was willing to come in and work with the team on the contract and to come in with a $2.9 million initial cap hit for 2021.
That's crazy.
Accept a deal that was almost half of what he was making before. And then you've got voidable years, so he does have the 2021 and 2022 years with a lot of guaranteed money there, but then they've done the 2023, 24, and 25 seasons that are voidable so that they can spread that cap hit out. Now the cap hit in 2023 is 4.2, but then it drops to 1.4 in each of 2024 and 25. That's a pretty reasonable amount of money to absorb if you're going to move on from Dunlap.
Well, and the whole thing, releasing him, bringing him back, his cap number for 2021, so this season, dropped from 14 million to, what was it, 2.9, 2.9, under 3, right? That's $11 million in cap space that they were able to use to sign other guys.
Yeah,
and reload the roster
and so forth, like Lockett, who we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah, Lockett also. I mean, he signed a very lucrative deal, and for him, I mean, well earned. I mean, the guy has proven to be one of the most dynamic and efficient receivers in the entire league. And I know for some reason he still doesn't get the credit for where he's at as far as all of that. But it was a well-earned extension and deal. It's a 3-year commitment to a guy that has earned it. And it also dropped his caps number for 2021 considerably. So it was able to also generate a bunch of cap space for the team, which is, you mentioned it earlier, like the fact that they went to Lockett and Jackson in order to rework their contracts, give them extensions, and create the cap space that they needed and have now, rather than Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, I think is very
there's a certain
very
method,
interesting.
There's a certain method to the madness of John Schneider and the way that they do contracts and the order in which they do contracts and retain guys and extend and so forth. And so I thought it was pretty telling. The one guy that I thought that was most telling was on Jamal Adams. So they did Tyler Lockett before Jamal Adams. I think that's a tribute to the fact that Tyler Lockett's been with the team, has had the loyalty. That's the order in which they want to do that contract. You know, the money's available and there to do a Jamal Adams extension if they want to do that this year. Strategy wise, with the roster and with the salary cap and so forth, it almost makes more sense to allow him to get to the final year of his contract. Because you've got more flexibility, more roster flexibility, and then you've got another year where you can get value out of him, A, and B, you can decide if he continues to be a good fit and you want to move forward with that long term, because that contract's going to be really expensive. It's going to be really expensive now if you extend him. It would be even more expensive after next year when new money comes into the situation with the TV contracts and so forth.
Well, there's a couple things with that. One is this team has a long history of saying, you know, we'll rework your contract when you have 1 year left. When you have more than 1 year, when you have more than 1 year left, you know, we're working with other people. And they've only made one exception on that, and that was Marshawn Lynch. And that kind of bit him a little bit, because then other guys were like, well, you did it for him, why not for me?
And the very next year, Cam Chancellor held out.
Yeah. And Cam didn't get what he wanted.
Exactly.
That year. He got it a year later. So, I mean, you end up, they don't want to make that exception again. They don't want to get themselves in that situation again. And so you're going to see that one probably not do anything and sit there.
They might do a deal at in training camp or, right before the season or something like that, but likely not. And the reason being is that Jamal Adams is a premier guy. And so the franchise tag actually comes into play with a player like him, because what happens is that he's going to go through his 5th year option year, and then you've got a franchise tag that you could apply. And a second one if you really needed to. But I mean, it really goes up after that. But I'm telling you what, though, the team's got at least 2 more years of team control with the franchise tag. And the franchise tag level for safeties is going to be about $3 or $4 million less that year than what he would want to make average per year salary increase, overall compensation. So it might make more sense financially and strategically for the Seahawks to put a franchise tag on him, like they did Frank Clark. And, as you know, the franchise tag does not prohibit you from trading a player too. So there's a lot of options there from a front office standpoint that I could totally see them play out with. Now, it might not make Jamal happy, but it's the business side of the end of this deal that I think you need to watch.
Yeah. And then the other thing is they didn't restructure Wilson. Why? Because trading him this offseason is financially a nightmare. Trading him next offseason actually is possible. And if all of the nonsense between him and the team this year doesn't get worked out, they want that option. And if you rework his deal to create cap space, he becomes kind of untradeable again next year like he is this year.
Right.
The Bobby Wagner one is the one that I found interesting, because what that tells me that they didn't go to him. They didn't just move his salary to signing bonus and push the cap hit into next year. says that they aren't necessarily sure how much longer he's, going to be with the team and got left being an elite player.
Just like Brown too, they had some money there to rework that as well.
Yeah. So you're looking at, a year from now, you've got Brown, Wilson, and Wagner, 3 of your better players, but 3 of your older players that all technically could be moved. If this team hit a point where they're like, okay, we're going to reset a little bit, you've got the ability to acquire a ton of draft capital real quick.
Right, and
with
cap
those
space.
3 guys, yeah,
and cap space. So, interesting. Yeah, I think overall, I think that the team, given the resources, given the draft capital, the cap hit, the fact that we had so many guys that were unrestricted, that could leave or we needed to resign, I think it was a pretty masterful job overall by John Schneider, to be completely honest. They upgraded the spot, as you said, with Gabe Jackson. That was probably the most important spot, given the strategy of trying to make Russell Wilson happy too. Regardless of Wilson, I think that they needed to address that spot, and they probably likely made a similar move anyway, regardless. And then the Dunlap thing, and there was just some really good, nice value signings as well. And then the extension with Tyler Lockett, to me, is a no-brainer. There's a couple of holes left on the deal, and we're going to talk about prospects here, specifically on the defensive line. One of those could possibly be a defensive tackle. So let's move into that conversation. So it's been a couple weeks, I think, since we've talked about draft prospects, and we've reached the month of April. It's the NFL draft month at the end of the month, and so we're going to keep talking about prospects that would be good Seahawk fits. Now, the issue is obviously Seattle only has 3 draft picks: a 2nd round, a 4th round, and a 7th round. Now, we've talked about the ability to add picks. 7th round is typically an area where John Schneider is not afraid to buy a pick. If you need to, you can trade a future pick and to acquire that sort of level in the draft. And then they likely seemed like they would move back off that 256 number, only because that's the only way they could generate really any draft capital at all by moving that pick, and maybe pick up an additional 4th round pick type of a thing, so that you could end the draft with maybe the top of the 3rd range, and then 2 4ths, and then a 7th, and maybe you could buy a 7th. You could leave the draft with 5 picks or so. What are your thoughts on just strategy before we get into players?
Oh yeah, if it's going from 56 and moving down to somewhere 60 to 65, you can get a 4th round pick for that. You can move down in the 4th round from once you got 2 4th round picks, so you move down a little bit. You're still in the 4th round, and you pick up a 6th round pick to do that. So you end up with late 2, early 3, 4 4, 6 7, and then you buy a 7th rounder, and you end up with a collection of players. Now that's all. That's no players in the top 50. Only 1 player in the top 100, 3 players in the top 150. I mean, it's not a huge draft haul as far as guys, but it's better than having three players, right? You need that youth infusion every year to keep your roster viable and going. At the same time, this is not a great year to be loaded up on picks because you don't know these players as well as you would in a normal year. There's no combine. There's no team workouts. There's no the individual stuff. You have half as many games to scout. You've got a bunch of players that opted out of the 2020 season. And you don't know these guys as well as you normally would. And it's and the draft is kind of a crapshoot. Normally
on a normal year,
on a normal year, and now you don't know the players as well, so it makes it even worse. It's just randomly throwing darts at a dartboard at some point, and so having this be the year where they have less picks makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. It's tough though when you get to the draft. You're going to want those picks.
You're gonna want,
and they're not going to be there. So
it's hard to go through the draft and to be there and all the things, and seeing other teams get guys that you like, that you believe could help your team win, and you see them going ever else, and you're like, but we don't get to take anyone.
Right.
We get to pick someone.
Right.
That's a hard spot to be in.
And it's hard too, because your team depends on low cost, quality incoming talent, and this is the best way to do it. And we're just going to take a year off. I mean, that's just basically what it's going to amount to. We may end up with just only one impact guy out of this draft, a guy that can make a difference in 2021. It could happen that we might not get a guy that makes any sort of impact this year, but maybe they plan on taking the kind of the future route with the draft this year. Who knows? But let's approach it and find out. The other thing we totally forgot to mention earlier was the team let go of Jerron Reed. So we're going to talk about defensive tackles here. Jerron Reed was our starting tackle. They've talked about LJ Collier moving inside, at least on passing downs. But the team, if they were going to, and they signed Al Woods. Now, Al Woods is more of a run stuffing kind of guy. He's not going to give you that penetrating disruption, but he is going to, take on double teams with Poona Ford and likely improves us even a little bit, stopping the run this year, which is great. But we might take a step back on rushing the passer. We just don't know yet. I think collectively our defensive line is really solid and better, but we'll see how that comes together. So what are your thoughts initially on maybe a couple of 3 techs that might come in and work into a rotation possibly, if we were to say use that early pick on a guy or the first,
I guess
rounder?
For me, like, could they use 56? Maybe on a defensive tackle, but knowing that they feel like they've got their 2 starters in Monet and Ford, I'm kind of expecting them to go either offensive tackle for the future, knowing that both of their offensive tackles are in contract year, or I guess one's in a contract year and the other one's just old, or to go cornerback, which they need a starting cornerback. But I looked and looked at this more in the next round, like 85, 84, somewhere in there, as kind of where I was looking, especially, or if they trade down a couple times to get more picks.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is also I wasn't enamored with any of the guys that were ranked to where they would be in the 50s, and that may be me and just misreading it a little bit. But Jay Tufule, who's out of USC, 6'3", 215, is one of those guys that I think is going to be available in the late 70s, early 80s, somewhere in there. Just a guy that is super explosive and gets in between blocks, needs the double team at times, and really needs, is a guy that I think can be a starter and be a 3 down guy, because he can rush the passer and play the run. I think it's a great value in that range. The reason why he's going to drop is because his tape is full of times when he, misread the blocking scheme a little bit, and he basically misread the play and attacked like it was a run when it was a pass, or burst up field like he was rushing the passer and left a hole for the person to run behind him.
There's a guy that wants to play out of the scheme because he's so athletic. He thinks he can make the play, which is a good thing if you can corral him and get him to play within himself.
Yeah, and so that's what he's going to need coaching. He's going to need to buy into that. And I think what it really, I don't know if he was wanting to play outside the scheme so much as he just misread what was in front of him. And so he needs to learn. And so he's more of a developmental guy, but athletically he can 2-gap if you need him to. He can, rush the passer. He can stop the run. Just overall, very athletic guy for his size, and I think could be a starter in the NFL. And so there's one guy that I really like, and in that same model, same spot would be Aleem Mcneil out of NC State, right? So he's a guy that, wasn't really asked to shoot gaps and make, get pressure. He was more asked to kind of do what the team asked Jerron Reed to do his first 2 years, and they've asked Poona Ford to do, and that's be the nose guard and just eat blocks as much as possible. But on the few instances when they did say, "Hey, go after the quarterback," he showed the explosiveness to do it. He just needs time and coaching to develop those pass rushing moves and make them more consistent and better. But as a guy that's going to come in as a rotation guy, not a non-starter for his first year, I mean, they could totally use that. And I just think that he fits really well with what Seattle likes at the position.
Yeah, no, I agree. The guy from Washington is going to go probably too early. Onwuzu rookie, I think is his name. Levi. I'll just call him Levi. 6'3", 290. So he's a total prototypical 3-tech. I think he comes off the board, before 50. To be completely honest.
He'll go. I think he'll go mid-second round.
Yeah, Davian Nixon is my favorite 3-tech, though, that could be in play if we were to stay around 56. Played for Iowa. He's definitely one of the most athletic guys at that position. And then a guy like Marlon Tuipulotu is another guy I really like. He's the other defensive tackle from USC. He's a little undersized as far as height, but he's really a guy that I like with good athleticism and agility and all that kind of stuff that kind of plays beyond his size. Like a guy that can really give you some good value in there and play in a 4-3 front and have a little bit of diversity for you. He can stop the run and can give you a little bit of penetration. Guy like that's pretty valuable. So how about just a base defensive tackle? Do you think the Seahawks are even looking at those guys this year in the draft, or it just doesn't seem like it? I don't want to completely trash the show because we're definitely going to be in the market for a guy, but I'm not sure it's going to be a high draft pick. It might be one of those
I don't either
kind of guys. Do you have anybody later in the draft that they might look at?
Oh, I got a bunch of guys later in the draft they're going to look at. In fact, that's most of how I prep for today's show.
Yeah, right. Well, give me one.
One. Do you want a pass rusher or just
like a Bobby Brown kind of?
Bobby. Okay, that's one of the guys I say. Bobby Brown the third.
Yeah.
It definitely has run stuffer in the middle. Could develop more. A guy like Kairos Tonga out of BYU, 6'4", 222. I mean, this is a guy that's a pure nose tackle. Basically he would be Poona Ford's direct backup and just command that middle of the line. Guy could eat blocks, requires a double team on running downs, that kind of stuff. I mean, he's kind of that's a type of player that the Seahawks like. I mean, look at Ford and Monet and they have a lot. They've gone and looked at those kind of guys a lot. So I like that. But for me, I was looking more at what do they need, right? They've got 3 really good run stuffers at defensive tackle. What they need is a pass rusher. They need a guy that can get upfield, create pressure, and they've had that over the years, right? They've had Clinton McDonald, and then they had Quentin Richardson. Quentin Jefferson. Wow. Who eventually got cut and then brought him back as a defensive end. And they looked for guys that can rush the passer on the interior and had just rotational guys there. And there's some decent ones. You look at like Jalen Twyman out of Pittsburgh, who's 6'2", 290, right? I mean, so he's undersized in the middle, but man, that guy's just explosive. And he's going to get kind of washed out against the run, but he's gonna be able to get upfield and get pressure on a quarterback. He's gonna move a quarterback off a spot. So Darius Stills out of West Virginia, who's 6'1", 281. So he's actually undersized, both in height and in weight.
Those
But
guys are kind of like fourth round guys, maybe.
no, I
Maybe
think they're
fifth?
lower. I think they're all guys that are going to go,
Early.
no, somewhere in like the round 200, 180.
Oh, that lower. Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure. Oh, okay.
Well, for Stills, I mean, why did Puna Ford go undrafted? Well, because he was short.
Right. Yeah, the guy's
And
only 6'1". Yeah, no,
yeah,
I get that, but
only
he's kind of
6'1"
got
and
that natural, lever quality. Can get down and
yeah, he'll win the pad level game. But we knew that about Ford coming out too, and his
No, you're
tape was
right. I mean,
tremendous.
they would love for him to be available in the 7th round. I mean,
Yeah,
Seattle would jump all over that because Puna Ford is awesome, but you kind of want a guy that's in there now. Monet's great.
240
And
pounds.
Woods is on a 1-year contract. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you want a guy to be able to have on the roster that you can develop and come in, especially like for a guy like Woods, that moves on, and a younger guy come in and take care of business like that.
Or just to have a fourth guy in the rotation, so you've got
Yeah,
3 guys that can play,
right.
all the time, and then you have the fourth guy that comes in on 3rd and long, or
Yeah,
in the 2-minute drill when the other team's throwing.
yeah. No, I
And
like your Twyman pick too. From Pittsburgh, that's a
Mhm.
great quality guy. That's a little bit higher end quality. I thought he would be kind of a 4th, 5th round guy, but maybe I'm wrong. The guy that I'm looking at the back end of the draft, like in the 7th round or undrafted, would be Taekwon Graham out of Texas.
Mhm.
At 6'3", 290 pounds. He's kind of a guy that you're going to develop along a little bit. But he's a total 3 technique kind of guy. And he's got, he's very strong. He's got some good hands to him. He just needs some more time and to develop on the back end of the roster. But he's got some upside athleticism, I thought, in that range, where you're going to take a guy late.
So in that same area, same model, same rough size, Mustafa Johnson out of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, you can use the same exact description that you just said, and apply it to him too. So just a very similar guy.
I totally agree. They're going to be in the same range, almost the same size. I think Mustafa is like an inch shorter or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that Buffalo defense, that the Colorado Buffalo defense, is an underrated unit most years. And a guy like that coming in from a program like that with good coaching on the defensive line there, I think is a guy that you could plug in right away in a rotation. And he's probably, sufficient enough to be on your back end of your roster and hopefully help you on some special team stuff as well. At 290 pounds, you could put that guy in a special teams role for sure.
Yeah, especially like field goal block, pump block, interior type of situation. You could definitely get some value out of that.
Absolutely.
And you're right that the Buffalo defense is underrated. I mean, it is. I mean, people don't realize that they actually have it's not the best overall program there in Colorado, but their defense is usually well coached.
So let's talk defensive ends and edge guys and maybe strong side linebacker types. We're not going to get into, but there's some crossover there. If we have 1 or 2 guys that might line up outside and move inside on passing.
Yeah, see, I didn't put. I don't have the notes on this because I was looking at Seattle's roster, and do you realize that they're like 4 people deep on both sides of the line?
Yeah.
Right, because go down, at the Leo spot, you've got Dunlap, you've got Mayoa, you've got Lewis.
Not Lewis. The guy that was starting last year.
Alton Robinson,
and Taylor.
Yeah, Taylor. That's right. So you've got those 4 guys at the Leo side, and on the other side, you've got Hyder, who they signed. You've got Collier, who was the starter last year. You've got Rasheem Green, who they're still waiting on developing into the guy that they saw flashes of when he was a rookie, but he gets hurt a lot. And you can move Taylor, Robinson, or even Dunlap over to that side if you needed to. I mean, they're loaded at defensive end.
I know they are. And, and so it doesn't mean that they won't take the best player available if somebody just completely falls to them or whatever. There's a guy on the roster like Ben Sameo who has a small contract that you could cut or release or try to, flip for a buy a draft pick or whatever, a guy sitting there and you just want to upgrade. I don't think it would happen during the draft, but during camp, you might release him for something. You're right. There's probably not going to be a lot of activity there for Seattle at the defensive end position. They do need a strong side linebacker kind of a guy though. And it, the speed level, I thought in this on the 40 times for some of the pro day guys were just incredible this year. I don't know if you saw 40 times for defensive ends, but like Jason Owaii from Penn State ran a 4.39 40.
Yeah.
Now I know you're going to say it's a hand stopwatch, all that kind of stuff. I get that, but nonetheless, that's blistering for a defensive end at his size.
Everybody's running super fast this year because there's no combine.
Right.
And so
at 6'5", 257 running a 4.4. What? That's if that were to be true, and if he was hand timed by some of the other team representatives there in that range, he could move up draft boards because of that sort of a performance.
Yeah, and so he's the type of guy that would be available at he might be available at 56. You might have to move up a little bit to get him. But he's in that range, right? And so, but if you're getting him, you're not expecting him to come in and be your defensive end. You're expecting him to be your strong side linebacker and use that speed and coverage a little bit, set the edge against the run, rush the passer, do a lot of different things. And I think that's that would be a great fit for him. But yeah, you're gonna have to use that 56 pick in order to get a guy like that.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. You can mention like Patrick Jones, same sort of player. Carlos Basham, you could play him at a strong side guy and move him up.
What about Quincy Roche
a
from
guy like
Miami?
that? Exactly. I think that he would be an outstanding strong side linebacker type player for you. But at 152, Seattle's there in the fourth round. If they're wanting a guy, it's just so hard because we don't know exactly what's going on yet with KJ Wright. And if they bring KJ Wright back, that pick is off the board because they're going to go spend that somewhere else. But if KJ Wright doesn't come back, there's Cody Barton's penciled in right now, along with Brooks and Wagner. And are we comfortable as a team, as a defense, especially with our defensive line, are we comfortable with Cody Barton playing at strong side? Likely not. I think you would probably end up moving Brooks over there just because it's more athletic.
No, you'd leave Brooks.
Really?
You'd leave Brooks at the weak, because the weak side linebacker is way more important
for you. For like, it's probably only going to end up being 25% of the snaps maybe this year because of the way that
they're going to play a lot of nickel.
Going to be.
Yeah, they're going to play a lot of nickel with Blair getting snaps.
Right.
And then you're also going to
want, they're going to be on the field a lot together.
Yeah. So you're going to have those two guys and Diggs. So you're going to have three safeties in a lot. So you're going to pull your strong side linebacker quite a bit. And then, and other times you're going to want to get your nickel corner in.
I could actually see them spending a free agent signing, low end free agent signing, maybe not even a low end guy, but a guy that's just sitting out there that's going to end up taking a veteran minimum salary that you could get that would be an upgrade over Barton anyway.
Maybe Bruce Irvin.
Bingo.
Which is part of why with this, I mean, honestly, like people are looking at KJ Wright, and we'd love to have KJ Wright back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But if he doesn't come back, I mean, Bruce Irvin, as he continues to rehab his knee, he's going to be able to pass a physical at some point, and he's going to sign. And he's going to sign for nothing because there's no money left out there. He didn't really play last year. He's an older guy coming off an injury. He's going to need to take a 1-year deal to rebuild his value before next offseason. And, so he's going to play for $1 million or $1.5 million.
Right.
And he could come in and still be your strong side, your linebacker, your starter, compete with Cody Barton in that spot. And it's a position that's not going to get a ton of playing time, as we've already said. So this is why I'm like, yeah, if we get KJ, sure, that would be awesome. But I don't know if the team has to do that. And I'm not that concerned about having Cody Barton there.
Yeah.
He played reasonably in that spot as a rookie. It took him a while to adjust because he is a natural weak side guy. Then they had to stick him in it at strong side with all the injuries and everything. And so he had a couple of off games before he started to come around. They could do that because he's not going to play much. You're right. You're not going to run. You're not going to line him up. And he's not going to play. This isn't like a couple of years ago where they were in the base defense all the time. This is going to kind of be the opposite. Mm-hmm. This is where they're going to be out there with, a lot of extra safeties and moving people around and doing that kind of thing. So I'm not that worried about it.
Right. I mean, it's interesting though, because Seattle does surprise you occasionally, and this could be a position where they decide to again expend a resource on a position where they have been fairly strong, and maybe just don't want to get weak and want to plan for the future a little bit. Maybe they're not enamored with Cody Barton. He's a great special teams guy, but obviously hasn't come in and played a lot of reps at linebacker.
He's a fantastic special teams guy.
A guy like Quincy Roach, like you mentioned earlier, can be a guy at 6'3", 243, plays at Miami. He's a real technician, a guy that can play that strong side for you and move up. Or if you determine later on, he does have the size and frame where you could stick him at the Leo spot full time and bring somebody else along at the strong side. So it gives you some scheme flexibility. A guy like that to me is a guy that I think that they would consider if he's there in the 4th round, or if they drop back off that second 56 pick overall and pick up an additional 4th rounder. Then you're starting to talk about guys and draft picks where they can then use on a player like that, and that guy as well would be a special teams star.
Oh yeah,
team because of his athleticism.
Yep. Another guy in that same mold, but much lower later in the draft, would be Shaka Toney out of Penn State. Really undersized at 6'3", 238 as a defensive end. I don't think that's where he sticks. I think a move to either an outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense, or a strong side linebacker in an odd front 4-3 like Seattle is where he belongs. And for me, what I haven't seen from him is like a 40 time and those kind of drills. So I don't know if he projects as a strong side linebacker, but if he does, making that transition, he looks like a guy that could handle it well, assuming that his
I know
measurables
he ran over he ran over a 4.7 something. But
was it really that slow?
Yeah, I don't remember what the actual time was, and he may not have had his pro day yet. I think he's either over that amount because he's not on my list of guys that ran sub 4.7, or he hasn't run yet.
Okay, because that would just remove him off. I'd take him off my draft board.
Right,
not completely.
A couple of other guys later. Pete Werner. From Ohio State. I like this guy actually. 6'3", 242. He's got great size and athleticism. And another guy, Dylan Moses. A lot of folks have him projected to go in the 2nd, 3rd round. I'm thinking he's more of a 4th, 5th round kind of a guy. 6'3", 235, a little undersized for rushing the passer. But he could be your strong side guy and come up. Definitely he'd fit that kind of a mold. Played more edge in college, but you're going to want to transition him to a strong side guy.
Yep.
That's really all I have on my list for the most part.
I've also picked up a couple of guys that were super late, that would you might pick up in the 7th round or undrafted free agent that could come in and compete with the very loaded defensive end group rather than just the strong side linebacker position. And a guy I like is Chauncey Golston out of Iowa, 6'4.5", 268, bigger guy, projects as a 5 tech in Seattle's defense. So he'd come in behind Hayter and Collier and, maybe, compete with a, to pick up a roster spot there playing, special teams and that kind of stuff. But I just like that he has great length and he, I don't know. He just has a certain level of explosiveness, good first step, type of guy that could come in and just set that edge for you on that side and do some good things. But he's got a lot of development to go to really take advantage of his athleticism.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
yeah.
And then go ahead. I was gonna say on the other side of the line, I've got someone too.
Well, I've got like in a 4th round type of guy. I really liked in that 5 tech role, which again, after getting Hayter on the team, you really don't need a guy there. But like a guy like Cameron Sample from Tulane, I really like, and he had a really nice Senior Bowl where he just really stood out. On a lot of running plays, holding the edge and forcing plays inside or making the tackle. I thought, he didn't show too much rushing the passer, but that's not what he was in there for. Back end guys. Now there's Malcolm Kuntz. There's a name to watch with a little bit of athleticism. A guy that's really athletic that can play a Leo spot that's just really tall and has a lot of athleticism is Ellerson Smith out of Northern Iowa. Depending on where he runs his 40 at 6'7", 245, that guy could be really interesting with those long wingspan arms to affect the edge. Other than that, Keith, I don't really have a lot of guys. The Taekwon Graham guy that I mentioned earlier at defensive tackle, he's also kind of he can be the 5 tech, so he can move in and out. And I would really look at a guy like that. The only issue that I have with him is he's probably going to end up being slower. Which makes you want to put some weight on him and move him inside full time.
Yeah, and then a guy that I had for special teams and development on the Leo side would be Kobe Jones out of Mississippi State, 6'4", 270. So he's actually a little big for the Leo, but he actually projects more as an outside linebacker, like a rush in a 3-4. So I think it's not that much of a difference for him to come up, put his hand on the ground, and rush in a pure pass rush only Leo. So he's a rotational guy that would come in and just attack on every down and not have any other responsibilities. But he's a guy that, despite being at 270, needs to improve his strength a bit. But man, he's explosive. He has that bend to get around the corner, potential to become an elite situational pass rusher. I don't think he'll ever be a full-time player, but we're talking about a guy that's a 7th round pick or undrafted free agent, probably in that range, maybe a 6th. I just don't see him going that early and just dropping. But at 270 on the Leo side, he brings a certain level of explosiveness at that size. A guy that could develop. I don't know. To me, it's he seems like a very Seahawks kind of guy.
Yeah, interesting. So, this was a hard show to prep for because of what you stated before. Seattle's just really not going to be in the market for the defensive line. If there was one area that I think is probably most improved on the team as far as position group, it's going to be defensive line this year. Even though we lost Jaron Reed, when you take a look at Hyder, and then you bring Dunlap back for a full year and healthy. You've got Mayoa back. You're bringing back a player that you've never even seen yet. That's a high draft pick from last year in Taylor. Robinson is had a great year for being a rookie and a 5th round pick. That guy's got, some serious potential there. They've got some options with Taylor and Robinson as well. They're of the size and athletic ability too, where you can scheme diverse that thing all over the place. I mean, the NASCAR packages that they can run with stunts and so forth this year, Keith, are just going to be amazing.
They're going to be fun is what they're going to be.
So next week will be a little bit more interesting because, strong side linebacker is a factor as far as a position of need still with KJ Wright not being signed yet. I'm hopeful that he returns on a 1 or 2 year deal, but that remains to be seen. I think there's some talk that he's interested and Dallas is interested in him. So we'll see how that plays out. And then safeties as well. We're going to talk about safeties next week. Obviously, another position where we seem to be at strength. Jamal Adams and Diggs. We've got Amadi and Blair. At the most, they need a back end filler guy that maybe scheme diverse. You've got what's his name?
Ryan Neal.
Ryan Neal's kind of scheme diverse. He plays a little bit.
He plays corner and strong safety.
Yes, right.
I think he's actually can play free safety. Although if he ends up in there for Diggs, they'll play more 2 high safety, drop Blair back.
Or Amadi.
And so they'll play with more guys with basically a 2 high safety rather than a single high. If anything happens to Diggs, but they just seem pretty set at safety, but corner's a mess.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. They need corners. And the fact that, Dunbar and Griffin are both gone, signed elsewhere, on with new teams, that leaves them with, it leaves them needing a starting cornerback. I still think they need a starting cornerback. I like a Witherspoon. But right now, he is he your cornerback 1? And I don't know if that's a good situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they might be enamored with him, but they need to see him on the field and work with him and find out what they've got. And until then, you're going to have to hedge that situation and that might be one of the likely picks in the draft. If there's 2 or 3 positions in the draft that are really strong: offensive line, corner, and wide receiver. And the draft is pretty strong from the 1st round all the way to the 7th round for depth at those positions. And so it wouldn't shock me. I mean, it would shock me. What am I saying? It wouldn't shock me if they drop back a little bit and pick up like a really nice corner in that 3rd round to be a starting outside level cornerback, because there are a few that are going to be available before pick 130. And I think that might be a good value spot to grab a guy in that position that probably could come in, at least compete with Witherspoon there for some time, and or Reed, and allow a guy to develop a year and see what you've got next year. Yeah,
it's going to be. It's a good year to need a cornerback because his draft is really good at corner, but the team needs at least 1. I would say probably 2, and that's not where the Seahawks want to be going into the draft. They don't want to go in knowing they have to find a starter at any position, and I kind of think they do. Yeah, I still think they need a corner.
I think they do, and I'm not as worried about it. I think they can grab one in the draft, and or I think there's going to be some options later on this summer. So tomorrow we've got a separate podcast that we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to be interviewing Surrey Poole, who is an NFL writer for the withthefirstpick.com. He's also a writer for the fan-sided network, the BB Chargers website, and he's the co-host of the Inside the War Room for the NFL Draft Bible and Sports Illustrated Now. And so that's going to be a fun show. We're going to talk draft. We're going to talk prospects. We're going to talk what Seattle's been doing this offseason. Probably some Russell Wilson talk. He's probably going to want to hear what we think about that. And we're going to want to hear what his outside perspective is on that as well. And just anything else that kind of comes up. We'll take a look at the NFC West. We're going to find out what other teams have been doing in our own division and how we stack up this offseason with those guys. So that's going to be a great, fun interview as well. That thing's probably going to end up coming out on Thursday, I think. And then, anything else, Keith? And we'll get this wrapped up, and we'll meet up again tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. I should say.
Yeah. No, I'm just this is one of my favorite months of the football year. I love the draft, love doing all this. I'm like, let's just keep going. Let's go.
I know.
I'm ready to talk cornerbacks if you want to record this.
Yeah, it's funny. We talk all these prospects, and then we get to right before the draft. We kind of have a draft preview show. We kind of rehash everything. We're going to do a little mock draft as well. Even though we only have got 3 picks so far, maybe that changes by then. Who knows what's going to happen? But we're going to talk strategy and draft picks anyway, because it's a tradition by now. We're entering our 5th annual mock draft preview show. So we got to do that. And I've actually got the schedule kind of built all the way through to the first regular season game, believe it or not, Keith. And I think I showed that to you, but I like to plan ahead. I guess I'm a planner.
You are a planner.
And right now I'm planning on ending this show. So find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. Seahawksplaybook.com has all of your shows. We're doing a back end redevelopment on the website. I'll share with you guys as soon as it becomes available. And what else? That's it. Find your favorite podcast app and add us to the platform, to your feed. Subscribe. YouTube, all that good stuff. So until next time, Keith.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.